in the report that those figures came out in, it was hidden away at the very bottom that as a result of job losses, massive cuts across the public and private sector, HMV and all those closing as well. There's been a 44% increase in households who are homeless after repossession. And the rise in homelessness, I'd say, is possibly one of the most damning indictments of this system. We're the 7th richest country in the world, failing to provide the most basic standard of living for ordinary people. And whilst wages have stagnated or been cut to a large degree, rents have risen massively, 8% since 2009. They're now at record high levels, meaning a bigger and bigger proportion of what we earn is spent on rent and other housing costs. Over 50% of my wage goes on rent. And from a personal perspective, I grew up in Hackney, went to school there, been priced out of there completely, had to move to Walthamstow, lived there for a year, and now my landlord wants to raise our rent by 15.7%, which is the national average is about 4%, so it's pretty bad. We contacted the Citizens Advice. They said, we don't deal with housing anymore, and told us that it's a free market and they can do what they want. And Shelter said, well, he just wants to make money. So it shows the kind of help that's out there available is extremely limited. One survey fairly recently showed that 30% of Londoners expect to be driven out of the capital by the high cost of housing, and more than 1 million people in London are relying on credit, payday loans, and that kind of thing to help pay their rent or mortgage in the last 12 months. You think that the Olympics and the success of it would mean that some housing would come out of it for ordinary people, but the reality is that of the fairly measly 2,800 homes that are going to be left as part of the Olympic legacy, only 675 are going to be social housing, with Barking and Dagenham, Hackney, Havering, Redbridge, Tower Hamlets and Waltham Forest sharing 107 of those, and Newham getting the rest, which is just an absolute joke. The rest will all be sold privately, of course, for a massively high cost. So, essentially the tax on housing benefit are only serving to force more and more working people to struggle to put money in the pockets of greedy landlords, profiteering landlords. It's this idea that we're scroungers and we get to profit from the benefit system is insane, because that money goes straight to the landlords and straight into their pocket, and they're in complete control of the system. And David Cameron stated that lower housing benefit limits will force landlords to reduce rents. But obviously the reality is that since rent controls were scrapped in 1988, housing benefit has quadrupled. And many landlords in a lot of the cheaper London boroughs, like Barking and Dagenham and places like that, are really seeing it as an opportunity to push rents up as this big influx of people are forced out of central London and the central London boroughs into their areas. And the government's really playing quite a clever game at attempting to sow divisions over housing, really launching an offensive to promote the idea that all benefits claimants are scroungers, really papering over the fact that there are nearly 700,000 working households that are forced to claim benefits. Why aren't we getting paid enough to be able to afford to rent a decent place to live? Why are wages so low? Why is the living wage so low? And in London, the attacks to housing benefit and soaring rents, high homelessness, all that kind of thing mean that 200,000 people could be forced out of the capital. And so we launched the Young Londoners Forced Out campaign through Youth Fight for Jobs to take up some of these issues. Obviously one of the biggest fears alongside unemployment is housing. I mean, I'd say that's faced by the working class at the moment, alongside cuts to the NHS and things like that. And our campaign's already gained a bit of momentum. Set up a Twitter account for the campaign within a day of us launching it, and it was immediately followed by Guardian Housing. Had a debate with Grant Shapps, who was the then-time housing minister, and was getting loads of support. We've been working with the Unite 111 branch, which is the housing workers branch, and held a launch meeting with them and the PCS, the Public Commercial Services Union in London, and held a protest outside the first GLA meeting after the Greater London Assembly elections, with a letter, similar to your pledge, asking London Assembly members to sign up to a list of 5 demands we've got over rents, the Olympic legacy, and I've got a list somewhere of all of them, but I'll leave that on there or something. And we also, we've launched a campaign in quite a few universities as well, because a big problem we found faced by students is the high cost of university halls and private renting for students as well, which has rocketed massively. We had one girl telling us she was paying £300 a week for a room in a shared house, and that was an hour away from her university campus. We had another one. I was out in Roehampton. She lives in her parents live in Barking and Dagenham. She can't afford to move nearer Roehampton, so she travels the 4-hour round trip to get to university. And I mean, that's like we've put some of those stories up on our website, and they get more hits than anything else. And there's a massive amount of anger over the issue, but really no outlet for it. And it's really is to agree with some of the comments you made earlier, a sleeping giant waiting to be woken. It's inevitable that it's going to come to a head unless the government is forced to make some kind of concessions. And in the US, I recently did an interview with someone who was over here from the Occupy Homes campaign in Minneapolis, which hopefully is going to go up on our website next week, which is a campaign that kind of grew out of the Occupy Wall Street movement and organised it to stop people being evicted, and it's had a massive amount of success at preventing working class people from being kicked out of their homes. In the US, it's a country where there's 5 empty homes for every homeless person in America, which is just insane. And the campaign now gets hundreds and hundreds of people asking them to help with similar cases, and has mobilised whole streets to occupy and protect residents from being evicted, and it's played quite a big role in like breaking down the taboo and kind of shame of being